Hello, and welcome to my draft breakdown of the IBL. Now, I was kind of fairly late in the draft pick. I think I was second to Wheel. So I was 11th out of 12th pick. And I thought for this one, because I've got my main league sorted out, I thought I'd still bring everything that I could to this league, but I also wanted to have a bit of fun with it. Initially, I decided that I would go for a monotype. This is going to be my fourth time drafting monotype, but the first time in kind of a big league. And I thought to myself, why not just, let's not just go monotype, but let's also play Disruptor. So I thought to myself, let's go for a mono fairy. Now, fairy is definitely one of the best types in the game. It's only got two weaknesses, steel and poison, and a lot of times you can mitigate those. But when you're playing mono fairy, it's a lot harder to prep for just because they know they can centralize for one type. But again, I wanted to have a bit of fun. I wanted to disrupt some teams, see how long it took for people to realise that I was only drafting fairies. And the drafting process was pretty slow. So I really thought I'd slip under the radar. I did have one Agent of Chaos come in quite early and kind of give the goose away. But that's life, that's draft. That's not to say that other people hadn't realised it from the start. But I'm going to go two picks at a time on this draft. So first up, I went for probably the best fairy type in the format. I've gone for a Alolan Ninetales. Now, Alolan Ninetales with that snow warning can self-set up some Aurora Veils. It can do manual screens if it really wants to, if it doesn't want to run weather. And outside of that, it's got a very good speed tier. I believe it's base 109. And, plenty of offensive options in its own right. It can Calm Mind, it can Nasty Plots. I think it may be able to Agility, I'm not sure. I can go for Blunder Policy Hypnosis, just to kind of guarantee that about speeding everything. It's really got a lot of, heat and tech that it can and run and do its own thing. I think Choice Scarf has been something that I've been having some success with recently in another league. That kind of speaks for itself. Very, very weak to steel. Weak to rock, weak to poison, weak to pretty much everything. Ice is a really bad defensive typing, but I believe it's the only one we've got in our team. Now next up we have another Premier Fairy type, Grimmsnarl. Now again, bear in mind that I was able to grab these two within 2 picks of each other because I am second to last. So Grimmsnarl is another really good screen option. Let's say for example they have mono Bullet Punch. Instead of bringing Ninetales, I can do the same thing with Grimmsnarl, which just takes an extra turn. Grimmsnarl's also got access to things like Parting Shot, Thunder Wave, and other kind of, offensively annoying status moves. And with that Prankster ability, it's almost guaranteed to get at least a move off before it goes down. So really, really good pick, really good support. With support with Grimmsnarl, Ninetales can set up for free from full. And the same is true the other way. I can set up an Aurora Veil and go for Prankster Bulk Ups, Nasty Plots even. Just between these two alone, I've got really good defense and offensive presence. The only trouble is neither of them have consistent recovery. Now, we're going to move on to our next two picks. We have Azumarill and Screamtail. Now, Azumarill under, with two premier screen setters, the belly drum set is really just going to go ham. You're going to have to prep for this. No matter what you do, you can't get away with not prepping for Azumarill. A lot of the time, the choice band is kind of wasted on most of these screens teams, but there's nothing to say that I have to go screens. I can also go defensive with Thick Fat and Sap Sipper, so that makes me immune to grass type moves, and also raises my attack. But Azumarill can also run things like Whirlpool, Perish Song, that kind of thing, very disruptive. It's just a difficult Pokemon to prep for in general. Excuse me. And our next Pokemon is a Screamtail. Now, Screamtail I actually had in a recent draft that I came, let's say third or fourth overall. I did make it to the semi-finals, but I was knocked out. But Screamtail, I feel like I didn't do it too much justice then, and I've learned a lot since in terms of using supportive Pokemon in general. Now I've got 3 of them. Now, Screamtail is a really fast defensive Pokemon. A speed really does come clutch sometimes. So as another screens option, it does have that potential to baton pass. I'm pretty sure in this league we can only dry pass, so we can't pass any self-gain stats or substitutes, but you can wish pass because baton pass is just kind of a pivot, so you can get the same effect by switching. So it's essentially the same. But this thing can also set up its own moves. It can go for Calm Mind, it can go for Bulk Up, Now, with those naturally occurring defenses and HP stat, you can get away with it, especially with the speed. So it's definitely not something to overlook, but it does need that setup to kind of go ham. And now this point in the draft here, as soon as I drafted this is where my game plan was kind of made aware to the general public. And over the next few turns, some fairy types were taken. I feel like those were fairy types that could have lasted late until later rounds as well. But the fortunate thing is, I was able to get my kind of next priority Pokemon anyway, and that is Rabombi. Rabombi is, especially for the amount of points it was, I think it's like 11 points. Really good value for money. It gives me a Pokemon with Shield Dust, so that's basically a natural Covert Cloak. Really good sticky web Pokemon. It's got access to things like Stun Spore. Excuse me. It's got things like Stun Spore, Quiver Dance. So looking at that speed stat, really fast. It's fairly just below like things like Electrode and stuff. So really effective Scarf potential. But a lot of the time it's going to be running Quiver Dance with its naturally occurring coverage. Now, unfortunately, I think it was. I mean, I think I could have terrored this thing. I'm not sure. No, I could have terrored this thing, but I did want to terror a couple of other things instead. Because this Pokemon on its own, with its natural coverage, really does just punch holes in the team. But for the most part, it does speak for itself. Also, it's really cool. One of my favourite fairy types. Look at that. Excuse me. Next up, we have a Mimikyu, a very good draft Pokemon in general. Outside of things like Mold Breaker, you've got yourself a guaranteed sweep stopper. So if the opponent's Pokemon has gone up to +6/+6 with Dragon Dance, so long as they don't have Mold Breaker and your Disguise intact, you can run Red Card and you're guaranteed to phase them out. The only time this doesn't work is if they're the last Pokemon and they've kind of gone for their final Gambit. In which case you're going to need to be able to naturally take care of it. But that's not as common. Not only that, but the Disguise itself can give it a free Sword Stance boost, and with its nice strong Shadow Sneak priority, Fairy typing, like everything else. But no, the Ghost typing makes it immune to normal type attacks. I'm not going to be worrying about fighting attacks on this team just because everything's Fairy. So essentially I've got one immunity, which I don't mind too much. And because it's Ghost, it's immune to trapping moves, so nothing like Shadow Tag or Mean Look, Infestation, etc. can keep me locked in. So I'm able to, switch around free for that. But yeah, Mimikyu also gives me a Pain Split Pokemon, a Pokemon that can inflict Curse, and I think just generally be an emergency kind of revenge killer as well, which is always quite nice. Now, as I said before, a lot of the fairy types started getting taken. Fairy types that I think could have lasted a good 2 or 3 more rounds before people actually started kind of realising what I was doing. But I've gone for Clefairy. Now, Clefable was taken in this 2-turn wave of max Exodus of Fairies. Clefairy was actually quite cheap as well, so it does pretty much everything that Clefable can do with Cute Charm, Magic Guard, and I think there's another ability that I can't remember. But it gives me access to Wish, Soft Boiled, excuse me, Cosmic Power, and with the Eviolite, technically I'm a little bit bulkier than Clefable as well. It does often force me to run that same item, which is unfortunate, but that's why it's so low in points, right? Clefairy does have some decent coverage options as well if I want to go kind of crazy with it. But outside of that, it's going to be performing very similar clerical roles. Now, next up we have Carbink. Now, don't be afraid of, well, I say don't be afraid. Don't laugh at this. You need to be afraid of this Pokemon. There have been a few people recently that have been burned by Carbinks. One of them in another server is actually quite famous for being swept by a Carbink. With that Rock and Fairy type, and since I believe this gen, maybe last gen, it gained access to Body Press. Now, with that massive base defense and Spadef, if I was to get Sand Up, I've got basically an Assault Vest. With an Iron Defense up, I'm just tanking any physical hit. Besides maybe Steel types, and I can really kind of start rocking some worlds with Body Press. It gives me a Stealth Rocker for the team. Clear Body is not affected by webs, but it's slow anyway. Yeah, outside of that, there's not too much I could tell you without giving away my sets. So I'm going to move on and go to Chimecho and Gothitelle. Now, what's that you're thinking? I thought you were drafting Mono Fairy. Well, again, I was, but most of them started getting taken. I think the only fairies left at this point were Wigglytuff and, kind of base forms like Flabébé and Floettes, which I didn't want to have to run another Eevee-like Pokemon. But Chimecho and Gothitelle, in my eyes, they're honorary fairies. And not just honorary fairies, but they're actually Terra Captains as well. I can't remember the other Terra types I've given them off the bat, because they may be subject to change, but I've given them the mandatory Terra Fairy to fit the theme of the team. Now, Chimecho's really good for one thing, one niche, and that is, at the time of drafting, it was the only one, and since then it has been swapped. I've actually traded it for Blissey, but Blissey and Chimecho are the only true clerics in the game. Now, they don't have, Chimecho doesn't have access to Wish. I think Blissey does. So Blissey being a true cleric like that, and able to actually sponge plenty of special defensive hits, and not terribly strong physical attacks as well. So let me change this real quick to Blissey, because I forgot to do that before. But yeah, look at that monstrous HP stat. Absolutely crazy. Some decent coverage. I could go for a calm mindset and actually start just clicking buttons. With that Serene Grace as well, I can get multiple paralyses, freezes and burns, etc. depending on what I want to do. But overall, it really fills its niche with that clerical role. Things like Screamtail don't appreciate being paralyzed. Azumarill doesn't like being burnt. And if my Belly Drum Gambit doesn't go right, I could always wish it back and try again later. Same thing applies to Grimmsnarl with its Prankster Bulk Ups. Ninetales Alola, kind of guaranteeing another Aurora Veil for free. Things like Rabombi could go for another Quiver Dance. Like, it's all up in the air, and Gothitelle is really good. It really pairs nicely with Screamtail. Just dropped my phone, excuse me. Yeah, Screamtail is one of those Pokemon that can click Perish Song, and if the opponent's not savvy enough or not able to take out Gothitelle in 1 or 2 hits, I can switch into this with Shadow Tag. Excuse me, with Shadow Tag. Just guarantee kind of a stalled knockout, which could be really good for certain Pokemon, but I feel like that's a tech that's going to have to be prepped for in most circumstances. I believe I've kind of leaked it a little bit, and we've gone a little bit away from the fairy theme. My original plan, I think by around 6 or 7, Walking Wake had been undrafted, so no one had drafted Walking Wake, and I thought at this point, if no one's going to grab it, it's not going to be drafted, so I can leave it to last. Big mistake, it was drafted immediately. But really, I wanted a really strong, fast Dragon-type Pokemon, or bulky Dragon-type Pokemon that can take advantage of the, in theory, lack of fairies on people's teams. So again, that was kind of spoiled, but again, people are going to be grabbing fairy types before the end anyway, they don't always last to the end. Well, I wanted something that could take advantage of people's lack of fairies, go for things like Scale Shot, Clangor Blaze, and just not have to worry about those fairy type attacks, only having to worry about Psychic and Ice, which again are quite easily mitigated. But this thing itself, I think it's banned from Omni boosting, so it can't use its like Heart Soul attack, wherever it is. A very strong user of Boom Burst. It's got plenty of coverage options as well, like really strong attacks. If this thing's allowed to kind of get off a boost at the wrong time, it can just snowball whole teams. And it also does kind of give me a bit of counterplay to some of these fairies' weaknesses. Naturally checking those steel types. This wasn't going to be a long one though. I didn't actually realise I needed to upload a draft analysis for this one, so apologies for the late video to the admins of the IBL. But hopefully this simple and effective one kind of put you in a mindset of just me trying to be disruptive, me trying to have a bit of fun. Trades could happen in the future. In fact, I've already tried to broker a trade. Someone drafted Galarian Weezing, which is something that completely slipped my mind. Something I wanted on my team ASAP with that poison typing, but alas, he didn't want to give it up, and I don't blame him. So I actually gave him my favourite Galarian Weezing sets. Top secret, you'll probably see them at some point. But yeah, look out for Galarian Weezing on someone else's team. It's actually probably the MVP projected Pokemon in the league, and it's not even on my team. And what does that say about me? But yeah, that was my draft recap. It was a bit rambly, as it is pretty much midnight as well. But yeah, enjoy.